for it, Randy.
Yes, can everybody hear me? This is Paul.
Hi, Paul. Yes,
Me?
we can,
Okay,
Paul.
good.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the special board meeting for the State Board of Education. And so before Peter calls the meeting to order, I do want to go over a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, board members, you should have received a Zoom reference sheet in your inbox. If you have any issues with your connection, you can reach out to Tammy during the call, and the instructions are in that information sheet that you received. I think we sorted through the key technical difficulties so far, but there may be more. And then members of the public are attending remotely. We're following the Governor's Proclamation 20-28 related to open public meetings issued on March 24th, and we're restricting public participation to online or phone access only. Also, due to limitations of the format, we're not accepting oral public comment. However, comments, questions, and concerns are welcome and can be sent to sbe@k12.wa.us, and that address should show up in the chat box. And to ensure we have a good connection, we're asking that that cameras turn off except while folks are speaking, and we will go through and have a couple of different speakers on the call here. So with that, Peter, I'll turn it over to you to call the meeting to order.
I call the meeting to order to discuss the emergency rulemaking pursuant to the direction in engrossed House Bill 2965 and related actions. Before I continue, everybody can hear me?
Yes. Yep. Yes.
Okay. I see that we have over 300 citizens who are joining us online. The number keeps going up as we speak. We welcome this interest in the emergency rules, and we have benefited from the comments and the ideas and the suggestions that the State Board has received from our educational partners, from school districts and administrators, from educators, from students and parents and other citizens. I want to start the meeting by acknowledging that in this online meeting without a specific geographical location, we're joining with and working for students and communities on the traditional lands across our state of 29 federally recognized tribes and numerous other Native American tribes that have not received federal recognition. The State Board recognizes that peoples native to this land have not been well served by our educational system and institutions consistently, as is our practice, and especially now, it is important to honor all students and to promote unity. And we ask that you join us in our commitment to recognize the important history of Native peoples in our state and in honoring the tribes of Washington State. We also want to acknowledge the work that educators and school districts and the entire educational community, the work that is being done to help our students and families cope with the coronavirus and its impact on our schools and our families. For example, school districts and others are providing food and supplies to students and families, are providing daycare facilities for healthcare workers and first responders, are providing lessons and other supports to students to allow continued learning despite the closure of school buildings. And there are countless other support services that are being provided across our state, and of course, more is needed. These are trying times for all of us. Together as a state, we will move forward despite the virus. And together, we will do our best to reduce the impact of the virus on our educational system. And together, I believe we will emerge from this experience with common purpose, always with the goal of meeting the educational students of all of our state students. Today, regarding the task at hand of considering emergency rules, the State Board staff will provide an overview of the law, and we will hear updates from partners engaged in critically important work that's related to serve the students in the state of Washington. This overview will be followed by a more in-depth discussion of the draft emergency rules for consideration this afternoon, as well as an accompanying resolution regarding delegation and the opening of possible permanent rulemaking. So we will begin by discussing the adoption of emergency rules, and then later on we'll talk about the permanent rulemaking process opening, as well as the delegation of authority that would allow the executive director to approve waiver applications on behalf of the board. I just want to mention that prior to the State Board staff using the delegated authority, the board intends to renew and to review and to consider the first round of applicants at a special board meeting on April 21st, and we'll talk more about that. During the presentations, board members are asked to submit clarifying questions in the chat box. Please hold other comments until staff call ready for discussion. You can indicate in chat if you'd like to be recognized. Please keep the video and microphones turned off except when speaking. Staff may also call roll call at points during the meeting, see if members have questions or comments. So we'll move forward through this methodically, carefully, and I asked Randy to call the roll board members to confirm who is in attendance for purposes of the minutes.
All right, thank you, Peter. And I believe we have everyone on, but I am going to call the roll. Peter?
Present.
Autumn?
Present.
Margarita?
Hi, present.
Okay, thank you. MJ?
Here.
Bill?
Here.
Harriam?
Present.
Jeff?
Here.
Holly?
Here.
Great, thank you, Holly. Paul?
Present.
Susanna?
Present.
Mary?
Present.
Mary?
Present.
Jan?
Here.
Patty?
Here.
Ryan?
Present.
Chris?
Here.
All right, thank you. And it's not in alphabetical order, I'm noticing, so you just have to guess. All right, thank you so much. And Peter, unless there are other things you wanted to add, I will go ahead and proceed on the first agenda item.
Please proceed.
Okay. So as Peter said, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the agenda today, and then following that, we'll have a couple of brief presentations from Governor's Office, from the Superintendent, and from WASDA to talk about some of the other work that's kind of wrapping around or happening with this work that the board is engaged in. After we hear some of the broader work, then we will dive into a little bit more of discussion around the emergency rules. I'll give a broad overview of those rules and talk about the timeline and next steps. And then we'll pause for questions. Following that, Julie will go into more detail on the draft rules and discuss the agenda that Peter had mentioned earlier. I'm sorry, the potential amendment that Peter had mentioned earlier. So with that, I will just really briefly, I think you can see the screen. So on the agenda, this is the same as the published agenda, except we inserted, just to make sure we didn't lose it from our discussion, brief conversation about potential permanent rulemaking and delegation of authority. So those are the other two business items on the agenda. And so we just want to make sure that those were noted. So you see it in italics on this slide. Otherwise, as we described, and then towards the end of the meeting, we will go through the business items and talk about next steps rolling this out, mainly talk a little bit about the application process, which will follow. For those that are connecting and don't get a chance to regularly see the board, we did want to put up images of the board members, so you had that for reference. And as people speak, they will put themselves on video as well. But this is also on our website if you want to see a little bit more about who you're hearing from today. So with that, I'm just going to hand it over. Maddie, I believe you're connected and can provide us a brief update.
Yes, thank you, Randy. I'm sure you've all heard the governor extended school closures through the end of the academic year. That order and proclamation was issued yesterday. The governor, it caused him quite a lot of consternation. Nobody wants to be closing schools, and you know, that's obviously going to have a huge impact on students and learning. But really, it became evident that well into June, we may need to prevent the congregation of groups in order to prevent the continued spread of COVID-19. And schools are a place where people congregate. So it's the public health issue that is the impetus for this school closure through the end of the academic year. He sought advice from State Superintendent Chris Reichtel and other stakeholders, school districts, the education associations, public school employees and others. He had a lot of support for this decision. Sometimes operating in a state of uncertainty is more difficult than knowing, even though it's not what you'd want to be doing. But, you know, the message was coming through that it was better to have a decision like this sooner rather than later. So the hope is that school districts and school staff will be able to continue to improve their ability to provide distance learning and continue to make improvements on equitable distance learning. We will certainly be providing as much support as we can from the Governor's office. We are working with various groups on connectivity, setting up Wi-Fi hotspots. Philanthropists are offering certain kinds of help to fill gaps. We're also looking to what we have in terms of stimulus from the state and federal stimulus packages in order to help with the various costs that are coming up through schools to better support students, schools and school staff. And with that, I'll just take any questions.
Linda, are there any questions in the chat from members?
I don't see any, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maddie. Superintendent Reichtel, would you like to provide a little bit of update of the amazing work your office has been doing?
Thank you, Randy, and thank you, members of the board, and thank you, Maddie. We've obviously been really busy for a long time, like you all have been, trying to close out a legislative session and create a meaningful guidance and framework for our school districts as we move forward. I always ground people in the truth of this as a health issue first and foremost. We have a global pandemic that's got literally hundreds of millions of kids around the world out of school and 50 million kids in the US out of school. All states have closed. 14 or 15 are now closed for the rest of the year. 4 or 5 more have effectively said to be determined, but are expected to. Another 4 leave it completely up to their locals, but are closed. So we're approaching half the states who are likely to not open for the rest of the year. As you heard Maddie describe, that was a difficult decision, I know, by the governor, and we were in conversation with him. The science dictates this, and our caseload has not peaked, and I keep trying to help folks understand that even when it peaks, you are not out of the clear. The reason we have flattened the curve is because we have isolated, because of social distancing strategies, because of the difficult decisions that the governor has made, we have gotten away from each other, and that's a good thing. It keeps our impact below that critical line of acute healthcare capacity, and it's saving lives. But it also means that we are not interacting, and therefore we are lowering our cases, and therefore we're not building herd immunity, if you will. And the science tells us that to have a meaningful return, you really need a vaccine at scale, or you need enough of our population who unfortunately gets the virus and then builds a natural immunity to it, it builds the antibody, so that as individual cases pop up, we don't have it in the form of mass spread. It's relatively isolated. There was no scenario where either of those 2 scenarios would be true for the April 27th return. The next contemplation was, well, why not just extend the closure a week or 2 at a time? And I think what we felt, having observed our partners across the country and engaged in some calls with our national partner. And some observation in the state is you leave people in a permanent state of limbo, not knowing how much they should dive into remote learning or continuous learning at a distance. And we felt it would be more appropriate for the science and for the learning if we made a pretty significant decision to join a dozen or more other states and close for the rest of the year. That allows us to get really focused again on this distance models that are out there, to get better at them. The governor carved out in his words the opportunity that should the science get to our side in a hurry, that there's a remote possibility of returning even for a day or two to wrap up our year, perhaps graduations for our seniors. Please do not take that as the default. In fact, it is a very low probability based on the science. But I know it was important for the governor to portray that as an opportunity that he is going to be observing and trying to figure out. And so we'll trust his judgment based on the science of that. Lastly, I just want to say to you all from a, sort of unknown perspective, the reason I spent some time talking about maturing this model of learning at a distance is I think the scientists are also telling us that there's very little probability we have a vaccine by this fall even. And if the public health experts don't tell us we have enough effective herd immunity, there will be risks of opening our schools to a return where we put 25 to 35 kids in typical 900 square foot classrooms. We will be back to where we started, where every case would cause us to shut down a building, an entire campus, do the contact tracing necessary, figure out who may have been in contact and sort of mapping all that out. If that's random individuals, like at the very beginning, that's very possible. If that is a normal occurrence, that's very dysfunctional to try to bring school back and then have it shut down. So I just want to be really transparent that we are all hoping and planning for a face-to-face restart in the fall, but we also have to plan as if this goes on longer, which implicates your work. The legislature gave the board really important authority to make the decision that I think we will be making today with respect to waivers and granting districts the ability to think about that. But there are longer tails to this that I think are really important for the thought leaders on this board to think about. Whether we come back face-to-face or not, you forever have at least 12 weeks of a second semester or a third trimester for kids with really strange and different experiences. And our higher ed institutions are working hard to try to figure out what that means in the future with respect to admissions and transcription and evaluating student performance. And we've observed Maine and California and other states, for example, just say to the seniors, we will not take into account what happens in your second semester. We understand how difficult it was. Many of our selective institutions require that fourth credit of science, or that fourth credit of math, or a third world language year. There are other states who have made blanket decisions as whole systems to say, we're not going to consider them. Maine just said, we're not even looking at SATs for this year's juniors. We know that date's been kicked out. We know it may not reflect all the learning necessary. Maine's just said for next year's admissions, they're not even thinking about how standardized tests are impacting it for this year's juniors. I don't know that our state can get to that place. We don't have a chancellor system. It's not centralized. Each, I think, institution will make their own decision. So I just give that to you as one of the literally dozens of things we have tried to grapple with as we've guided districts that I think become important legislative policy considerations and possibly State Board of Ed policy considerations, because ultimately you all are affirming that districts meet their basic ed requirements. I have the ability to waive days and hours, but I can't add to the schedule, and they're ultimately affirming to you all that they've met their basic ed requirements. And so there's just a lot of contemplation that does not end with this action today, and may not end just because we ultimately return to something that looks more normal. I think there are real policy implications down the road for really student transcripts the next 4 or 5 years. And I just wanted to give you that sense to help shape for you kind of some of the big stuff we have to grapple with. Finally, you've seen a lot of our guidance. I won't go through it. You've got the ability to access on our website. We post it literally real time as we send it to the system, so all of the public and all of the people of our state can see that guidance. The latest work, of course, was really powerful work around supporting districts in continuous learning, giving them more framework for what does quality education look like and how do we build and maintain momentum for students through the next 10 weeks or so, and obviously possibly beyond. That interacts with your work today. This is ultimately a waiver possibility for districts, but we expect the good faith effort is real, and we expect districts to continue to engage families and students in learning, including our seniors, and we expect that our teachers are making meaningful understanding of what their students know and are able to do. So just want you to know we're trying to partner with you and complement your work. Thank you very much for what you have put in. This has been breakneck speed for many of you, and we're grateful for the partnership. This has been remarkably challenging, and there's a lot more tough decision making to come, but I'm looking forward to what happens today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I think Patty has a question.
Hi, Chris. I had a question about the phrase, this facilities having limited use of school facilities for meeting some students' needs, and I just wanted some clarification around that. What did the governor mean, and what's your interpretation of that?
Yeah, maybe Maddie wants to follow me on this for the governor's role here. We just sent out additional guidance. I think the governor's office just sent out some clarification there. We still think this is an incredibly narrow exception. The rule, the proclamation is that our buildings are closed for direct, traditional, face-to-face, in-person instruction. The governor's proclamations have made clear that food preparation is allowed, limited childcare opportunities, and there was always language in there about health and safety. Our guidance even 3 weeks ago said there may be opportunity for very narrow, like one-to-one engagement of students if an online platform doesn't work and there's nowhere else to do it, and it's an essential service, and our buildings become the essential and only way they can do it. So we still think it's an incredibly narrow opportunity. That's what our guidance says. But Maddie, I see your screen pop up here. You may have additional context.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. I realized I should have added it to my previous comments because I believe it has caused some confusion. There was something the governor mentioned in his comments that I believe, needed clarification. We issued a press release today. Randy can forward that on to you. It is on the governor's website. I'm actually going to read out a couple of paragraphs just to clarify. So under the order, school facilities may continue to be used for preparation of food service, childcare, and under very limited circumstances to provide other social services that are not possible to be provided off-site. At all times, these services are only allowed if they follow public health guidelines. And to protect the health of students, staff, and providers, the intention is not that school buildings should be open and serving all students with significant needs. The intention is to provide districts with the ability to provide essential and necessary in-person services to individual students in the very rare circumstances that the services cannot be provided on site. So the intention is not to open up to any groups of students for educational services at all, and I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maddie.
Is there anything, Peter, here, is there anything further that either Maddie or Chris you'd like to say, or are you ready to move on to the next, or questions from other board members?
No, thank you, Peter. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So, Randy, please proceed.
Okay, so next we're going to hear from Abigail with WASDA, and an essential part of making these waivers work, and also the broader set of issues that local districts and schools are dealing with, will be some policy work that WASDA is moving forward with. And so Abigail was going to just briefly talk about how that's proceeding.
Thank you, Randy. For those who don't know me, I'm Abigail Westbrook. I'm the Director of Policy and Legal Services for WASDA. I want to thank the board for all your work on the emergency rules and presenting us with some tools. So we have been looking closely at the emergency rules and thinking about what we can do to support implementation. And so we are working now to develop a provisional policy that would sunset at the same time that the emergency rules sunset, that will help boards put this in place, adopt it, move forward with the plan, with the rules. Additionally, it's really brought to our attention that boards need to take those good faith actions about not only, before we're waiving credits, but how can we award credits. So we've really taken a close look at abilities to provide competency-based or mastery credits. For a long time, WASDA has had a model policy 2409 that's a policy about awarding competency-based credits for world languages. And that policy has included a short sentence that says this policy could serve as a model for several other subject areas for those core subjects that have state learning standards. What we're working on right now is to develop model policies for all of those areas so that school boards can readily see that that's available. And the law does require that districts need to have a policy in place before they can award that kind of credit. So we're hoping by pushing those out, we're aiming for the end of the week, that will open the door for boards, just give them whatever options they might possibly have to award those kinds of competency-based credits. Been working closely with staff, with the state board and OSPI to get that done. And so watching closely your conversation here and wanting to help you move forward so that we can help these kids. And I'm happy to stand for any questions for me.
I don't see any in chat. Linda, do you have any members who've indicated they want to speak?
I don't.
Okay. Thank you so much, Abigail.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, actually, Holly does have a question. Go ahead, Holly.
Hi, Abigail. Could you just very briefly speak to what kinds of options districts have for the competency-based crediting? Maybe just give a few different examples.
Absolutely. So there are several core subjects that have state learning standards developed, and I'll list them off. Those are English language arts, math, science, social studies, the arts, health and fitness, integrated environmental and sustainability education. I'm sorry if I've went through that too quickly, but our goal is to have a model in place, a model policy by the end of the week for each of those areas. And then it'll take a little more time to develop the model procedure because we need to work closely with those experts at OSPI and other places to get those in place. But at least that model policy will be there. And that is the legal requirement to offer competency-based or mastery credits in those areas. And at the same time, we can add some provisions in those policies so that it becomes clear if students can show mastery by having passed a state assessment or other assessment, or taken a higher level course with a sufficient grade, that they could get some competency credits those ways. So does that answer your question, Holly?
It sure does. Thank you. Those are the kinds of examples. That's what I thought was happening around the state, and that some local districts already had policies like that in place for things besides world language. But I just wanted to make sure that I was sort of thinking along the same lines. So thank you.
You bet. It's a really good point. What we've learned is that some districts are ahead of the curve and are out there and have already been doing this. But I think many have been unaware of these options. So trying to just heighten that awareness.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe it'll be the silver lining, you know, that we jumpstart this a little.
Okay, Randy, if there's nothing else, then I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? I don't see any. Linda, are there any in chat? Oops.
Nope, they're not.
Okay. So moving forward, just a brief look at the timeline. So we have, it's hard for me to imagine this has only been about a little over 3 weeks, but we, the first, actually the declaration of emergency started February 29th, so that's a little bit longer ago. But the bill that kind of started this work was signed on March 17th. The board met on the 26th. We had draft rules for board members, and these were shared with some of the education agencies as well and associations on the 3rd. We got some feedback on that round and had a subsequent draft out on Monday. The 6th, which also happened to be the day that the announcement for closure of school buildings for the remainder of the year also occurred. And then we received some written comment, which was shared with the board yesterday, and then we're up to today. The next steps, once these rules are adopted by the board, they will go into effect almost immediately. We will also roll out an application for districts as soon as possible. The rules say by no later than the 15th, and that's what you see on the chart here. I want to just acknowledge the great work that OSPI's team has done in helping develop the application. We think it's going to be ready this week to launch, but that depends a little bit on whether changes are made during the conversation today. But they did an outstanding job of really turning around very quickly, and so thank you, Chris, and your team for that work. And then, as Peter mentioned, we've also put on our list a special board meeting for April 21st. That would be to consider the first round of applications, and then if the board delegates authority, subsequent applications could go through on a very through the staff, and I could approve those on a rolling basis. So that would so that's what we have in mind for the next steps. Also, I mentioned we got a lot of feedback, so just I'm going to pause on this slide just to say we have a lot of folks out there in the community and partners at other agencies and associations that have been giving us feedback and in a very short time. And so we very much appreciate that. It helped us draft the rule or craft the rules, and we're going to be talking about the potential amendment we're going to be talking about later is a reflection of some of the feedback we received through this process. So.
Sorry, Randy, MJ has a clarifying question.
Yes. Hi, MJ.
Hey, Randy. Yeah, just thank you. I just, got some questions on the April 15th. I think you clarified it, but I just think it'd be good. Some people thought that was when districts had to apply by.
Oh.
We're basically saying this is our commitment to get the application out there to you by, correct?
Yes, so the April 15th is a deadline for us, for the board, to get an application out in the field. And it will, again, very likely be before that. And we don't have in rule a deadline for when applications need to apply or districts need to apply other than the authority ends on July 31st. That said, I don't know if I had it in the timeline slide, but we're anticipating that we would want to have applications, I think it's on a subsequent slide, not later than June 19th, which is the end of the regular school year. We want to make sure that we have time to get through applications before the authority expires as well. But there's some flexibility on that. And one of the reasons we didn't put a deadline in rule is because we wanted to keep a little bit of flexibility if applications do trickle in. So.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, in terms of what the authority is and what we're working on here. So 2965 was the legislators' response to the coronavirus broadly. It included a lot of provisions, but part of that section 10 through 12 were dealing with this issue of the ability to waive credits, and for private schools, the ability to waive hours and days. For the current the graduating cohort of 2020 and earlier, the earlier is because we know that we have some students who had been working and planned to graduate this spring that were in a prior class. So that's where the earlier comes in. And then those students do have to have been on track to graduate with the class of 2020 during this school year. The hour and day requirement for private schools, I just want to clarify on that too, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. So as Chris mentioned earlier, OSPI has authority to waive these hours and day requirements for the public schools. That there's no authority in statute for that for the private schools, and they are still required to meet either days or hours. And so the emergency authority allows for a waiver of that time for the private schools. And so we'll talk more about that when we get to the rules, but that was what was contained within this. There are also a couple of key terms that I'll talk about in just a moment. In fact, I thought I had the key terms in here. We don't. So Jaylee's going to go over it, but a couple of key terms. We have this notion of on track, which we have defined in the rule, and we also have the good faith effort, which has been mentioned a couple of times. And essentially, the point of that is that this is not intended to be the first tool in the toolbox. The hope is to get students credit first, and if we can't get the student credit due to the closures, then we would look at whether the waiver is a good fit for an individual student. So that's putting it into context. So in the rules, this is a new chapter in WAC. It actually won't get codified because it's emergency rules and it expires, but just to give you a sense of what it looks like. And so the authority and purpose really draws on the legislative language that gives the board the authority to go forward and subsequently the district's authority to use this waiver. I mentioned the definitions, and then the public institutions need to apply for this waiver authority. And then we have a description of how the authority for credit-based graduation requirements work. That applies to both the public and private institutions. And then we have the description of how the waiver authority works for the private institutions. So that's the broad overview, and I'm going to pause there. Actually, let me just talk about next steps and then I'll pause. So we're hoping that the board will adopt the rules today. We clarified the application. First round of applications on the 21st, and this has the remainder of the timeline here. The 19th is when the current school building closure order ends, and would be the likely deadline for districts to apply. And then waiver authority ends on the 31st of July. So now I'll pause and see if members have questions.
So Randy, before you do that, Peter here, we're going to go into more detail with Jaylee Schultz and others. So if somebody has a question, a clarifying question about what's been said so far, that's fine, but we're going to have a more detailed presentation and then just ample opportunity for discussion.
Okay, I don't see any in the public chat. Linda,
did you?
I do not have any requests.
Okay. Okay, so I think with that, I will put up our contact information. This has come up in chat a few times as well, but if members of the public want to provide comment, they can send it to spe.wa.gov. I'm sorry, that's our website, spe@k12.wa.us, and the address is on the screen here or in the chat window. And with that, I think if it's okay, I will turn it over to Jaylee and she can go through more detail.
Okay, hello everyone. So my plan for how to facilitate this is I was just going to begin with a real quick summary of some of those key terms that Randy referenced that needed to be defined in rule. And then we will walk through the rules section by section. And my plan was to highlight for board members what we have changed since the earlier version that you saw based on feedback that we've received. So I will emphasize those changes, and then we can pause section by section to see if there are any questions or comments as well. So just to begin.
Jaylee, could you introduce yourself and anybody else, staff member too?
Yes, sorry, I'm Jaylee Schultz. Okay, so right here I have displayed the establishing legislation. This came from the coronavirus response legislation, House Bill 2965. And as Randy mentioned, section 10 is the authority for establishing this emergency waiver program. And so I just want to emphasize a few main points and a couple key terms that we have to define. So first, wanting to emphasize that this was designed to be a temporary solution for the immediate problem at hand, to provide districts authority to waive certain credit requirements for individual students who are on track to graduate this school year and were unable to complete the required credits despite a good faith effort on the district to help the student earn the credit. And then also some additional authority to provide for hour or day waivers for private schools for the 1920 academic year. It's limited to students in the graduating class of 2020 or earlier who are on track to graduate. So on track to graduate is one of those key terms that we define in rule. The waiver does not serve to grant credits, but rather waives the need for the credits in order to earn the diploma. So another thing we define is what can be waived. School districts, charter schools, and tribal compact schools must apply to the State Board of Education, and this is in the establishing legislation. So there is a section in our rule on the application aspect. And then the State Board will approve the local education agency's authority to grant individual student waivers. Schools and districts will be responsible for reviewing individual student circumstances and determining the number and type of credits to waive in accordance with the program rules. To receive a waiver, the LEA must demonstrate a good faith effort to address core course requirements and credit deficiencies through other mechanisms. So this term here, good faith effort, is another thing we define in rule. And then just mentioning again, this last part here is about the private school ability to waive day and instructional hour requirements as well. So with that, I'm going to switch over to pull up the draft rules. These are part of the board meeting materials, so any members of the public can also pull these up from our website. Just to orient you to how this chapter is structured, we begin with a section on our authority and purpose. Then there is a section on definitions that apply to the whole chapter. And then the next section is on the application and approval process for local education agencies to apply to the State Board. The next section is on once you have that authority, what is the process, what are the requirements, and what is that can be waived. So it goes into more detail here. So this is focused more on the application, and then once you're granted the authority, 040 dives into what can be waived. And then 050 is the section on private schools. Any questions so far before I dive into the first section?
So Jaylee, I see no questions. I think though what we'd like to do is after you present each one, then we'll take questions and comments and discussion about that. But I do see that Harry Martin Morris has a question.
Yeah, and this is more one of process. So as we adopt these rules, what happens after the 31st? Because these are still there. Do we have to go back and do some other changes, or do we just leave that language sitting in there?
Okay, so these are being emergency rules. They do expire, and our authority, likewise, as you're pointing out, expires July 31st. At the end of this meeting, I believe Parker is going to talk about starting the permanent rulemaking process as well, and our thinking around that, which is so that if there were to be a special session, that we're ready to go to reissue rules quickly. And so we will talk about that later on as well. Does that get at the issue?
Yeah, yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to dive into the first section here then, section 010 on our authority and purpose. So this is just pointing to the establishing legislation which authorizes us to administer an emergency waiver program. The purpose here, these words parallel very closely that establishing legislation, that this is for the graduating class of 2020 or earlier who are on track before the declaration of emergency, and to address the measures taken by local education agencies in response to the novel coronavirus. One minor change that board members might notice between your earlier draft and this draft is that we've added B here. This was just an oversight that we intend to mention also, that the authority and purpose of establishing the hour and day waiver for private schools. So that was added in here. And then this expiration date comes from the establishing legislation, and it applies to the chapter as well. Any questions on this section?
Jaylee, I see no questions. I was going to suggest that we go through the sections one by one and then come back to the staff proposal for option B because it spans all of them. Does that make sense? Rather
Yes,
than dealing with it piecemeal. Yeah.
I think that'd be a great way.
So any board member have concerns, questions about 010 authority and purpose? Otherwise, we will move on. Please proceed.
Okay, I'll move on to 020, which is the definitions. These definitions apply throughout the chapter. We define local education agency, meaning a school district, charter school, or tribal compact school. These are the entities that are referenced in the establishing legislation. And then we also note that references to community and technical colleges that are offering high school diplomas, that this would also apply under an existing WAC. For on track to graduate, we've defined this as based on the students, what credits they have earned up to that point, and then their current or planned enrollment as of the gubernatorial declaration of emergency of February 29th. That enrollment, what they'd completed and what they were planned to complete by the end of the year, would have been sufficient as determined by the student's local education agency or private school for the student to meet the applicable minimum state graduation requirements by the end of the 1920 school year, excluding summer school. So a couple of changes between our earlier draft and this draft. We did move around some of the words a little bit just to clarify that the determination is what is sufficient. So we've just simply rearranged the order of the sentence here. And then we previously had said by the scheduled end of the school year. We removed the word scheduled because that could be variable and was not a very clear term. And then we added excluding summer school. And this was added for clarity because we were receiving a lot of questions about the whether or not this could include summer school our initial interpretation was that we couldn't based on the July 31st expiration date. We've further explored that, and this is the meat of that option proposal that we've referenced that we'll bring up for thorough review and discussion towards the end. But the idea there is we now think we might have we have flexibility to be able to consider summer school as well, and so the proposal will change, if the board goes that direction, would change this language. But the draft that was posted as of Monday afternoon had this language inserted in it to clarify that point, which did raise some more questions and feedback. And I'm just gonna ask to Peter's point for holding on questions on that aspect in particular, if possible, until later, because we will review the other proposal with that piece. But for now, I'll go continue on with the rest of the definitions. So good faith effort means the local education agency or private school considered and implemented options determined appropriate by the local education agency or private school to support individual students in meeting credit requirements. So the idea here is that this is a locally determined thing at an individual basis, but looking at what options make sense to support that student, with the first goal to be wanting to help that student earn the credit. So that's our preferred option, is to do what we can to support the student in earning the credit, with this waiver being the other tool available after exhausting those other options. As far as what those options could include, we provide two sets here. The first, in Part A, we're referencing the wonderful guidance that OSPI has put out. They've published bulletins. A really great one is the one on supporting seniors during long-term school closures, this one being very relevant. So we point that one out here. There was another one issued on March 23rd. And so there have been additional ones, a recent one as well. And so that's why the language is worded broad enough to acknowledge any related subsequent bulletins as that guidance evolves. So we're first asking districts to review the guidance that is out there and to try the options that are determined appropriate for their local context and for their individual students, and try those options first. We also are pointing to, sorry, something weird going on. This part here in section B is just acknowledging some existing authority that local education agencies and private schools already have, and just more as a reminder of that these options are available to try as well. And so this points to, we put this one up top. This is a change from the earlier, is we just kind of reordered this to emphasize that the local graduation requirements may be waived at local discretion without approval of the State Board of Education, because this was a common question that we were getting. So we moved that one up top. And then these were just worded, a few minor wording changes throughout these. The substance remains the same, some wording just to kind of for efficiency's sake. And then we added this reference here to the 24 credit framework for clarity, pointing out that there is a 2 credit waiver of flexible credits available to LEAs that have implemented the 24 credit framework, and a couple of other existing authorities as well. So I'll pause at this point and see if there are any questions on the definitions section, other than, of course, the question on the summer school piece that we'll revisit later.
This is Patty. I had a question. I wanted to know, can you go back to the part about on track to graduate and the local discretion? Yes, I wanted to clarify that the on track to graduate by being enrolled in the current program and the local discretion, would that enable students who are in credit retrieval programs and credit retention programs to be eligible for this, even though they might have a significant number of credits that they still need to retrieve in time?
Great question. So the idea behind this is that if their planned enrollment would have, if it would have been conceivable for them to complete this by the end of the school year based on their enrollment plan. If they had the planned credits that would have allowed them to complete, then they would be considered on track.
Okay, so I think that sounds like that would take care of students in credit retrieval and programs.
Yes.
This is Randy too. I want to add, you didn't ask this question, but we got a lot of people asking about the grade as of February 29th, and this rule does not reference grades. It really is about enrollment. And so that will come out in guidance. It's not something we wanted to put more words into the rule on, but we did get a lot of questions about the grade a student had at a particular point in time.
This is Peter. I have a question. Going back to the definition of local education agency at the end, it refers to community and technical colleges and says that references to a local education agency would apply to them as well. So just want to make sure that I understand, and also for our community and technical college partners who may be logged in, that would mean that they would have to apply as well as they have for some of the waivers, because some of those institutions are actually granting high school degrees. Is that correct, Shaylee?
Yes, that's correct.
There might be a question from Hariam.
No, nothing for me.
Okay, any other questions on the definition of either local education agency, on track to graduate, or good faith effort? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to continue, and you can just pause and let me know if anything pops up. Okay, so moving on to section 030 on the application and approval process. As MJ noted early on, there was some initial confusion about the way an earlier draft of this had worded. And I think we've fixed that here. So this makes it clear, beginning no later than April 15th, the State Board of Ed shall make an application available. So this was our target date for ourselves to post that application, not the deadline for submitting applications. A local education agency may apply to the State Board of Education for the authority to waive credit-based graduation requirements for individual students. So this is clarifying that they apply to the board. The board, if we approve them, they then would have the authority to waive at the individual student level. And the State Board will accept applications through a deadline to be determined by the State Board of Education. So as Randy pointed out, we didn't put a specific deadline in there. We're still figuring out the details of the application process, but we wanted some flexibility on this piece, but the authority does expire July 31st. So it would definitely have to be before then. Subsection 2 here are the criteria that the local education agency must meet in order to be granted the waiver authority. So on the application, they will have to self-certify each of the following. And let's see here. Okay, so first, we moved this one up top based on a lot of feedback that we want to put equity as the first consideration here. So the first one is local education agency has considered equity in applying for the waiver and will consider equity in administering the waiver. This may include, but is not limited to, an equity analysis, community outreach, or other means to assess and mitigate potential disparate impacts of this waiver. So the language on this one has been changed a little bit from earlier drafts. So not only did we move it up top, but it previously had referenced developing a plan. So the idea that the local education agency would consider equity in developing a plan for administration, and that gave off the impression that we were going to be requesting that plans be submitted to us, which was not our intention. So we removed that and instead switched to the language about consider in both applying and in administering. And then we added the word and mitigate, so that not only assessing impacts, but also mitigating them. And we changed from the word consequences, it previously said consequences of the waiver, and now it says potential disparate impacts, to convey that we want to look at how this waiver could impact different students differently, and looking at equity in that way as well. So the language, it still has flexibility in it as far as the specific approach that the local education agency could take. We're leaving that open to their determination, but putting it up there that we expect that equity will be considered both in applying and in administering. The next requirement that the local education agency must certify is that they will grant waivers on an individual student basis to eligible students in accordance with the following section. And so the question had come up about whether this waiver could be administered in a blanket fashion to the senior class, and that's not how this is intended to be used. We expect to see that good faith effort being done at an individual student level to try to help those students earn the credit, and then this likewise to be an option identified at the individual level. Another thing that they certify is prior to granting a waiver, they will make that good faith effort to help the student address credit deficiencies. So that has to happen before resorting to this waiver. And that the local education agency will administer the waiver in compliance with the rules as outlined throughout the chapter. So we're listing a few of those rules here. This is to be comprehensive, and note that we expect all of the rules in this chapter to be followed. And so the application, at the stage of application, the local education agency has to certify that they will meet these requirements. In subsection 3, we see that the application must be certified by the superintendent or equivalent personnel, and this is one of those pieces that WASDA is helping us with as part of the model policy. Section 4, the State Board of Education may approve applications that meet the criteria, and the board may delegate this authority. So later on, I believe Peter mentioned the resolution. So that will come up for discussion later on, a resolution that would allow the board to delegate the authority for efficiency's sake, so that the executive director could approve applications. And then the final item here, the State Board of Education shall promptly post on its public website the information collected on the application, list of applications received, and decision to approve or deny. A few changes to this here. We added the word promptly, and this aligns with the wording in the resolution, as does a little bit more detail here compared to the earlier draft on what information we will post. So at this time, I will pause and see if there are any questions on the application section.
Julie, Peter here, I have a question. Would it be possible for you to put on the screen the application that was included in the materials, so that those viewing online can see what is involved in the application?
So I just pulled it up. I do want to note the formatting is going to look differently. As Randy mentioned, OSPI staff are working on putting this into the iGrant system. So the formatting looks different, looks a lot cleaner than this version here, but the wording is similar. And so essentially is the yes/no statements that they have to certify. And if they are unable to meet any of those requirements, there is a text box to explain, and then a certification where the superintendent would sign.
So essentially this is self-certification with accountability being given to the person signing, or assigned to the person being who is signing. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Peter, I'll note too that the 4 yes, no questions are the same 4 criteria that Jaylee went through in the rules.
And fairly simple for the consequences are important, but the application itself, I note, is fairly simple, and that was the intention, correct?
Yes, this is another thing to keep in mind is at the time that this was drafted, closures weren't school-wide yet. And so that's why you see the language about the application in the bill language. And I think with the situation changing and with closures becoming statewide, we do anticipate that we could see an application from each of the districts that offers diplomas. And so expect to see quite a few of these, and recognizing that we need to be able to approve quickly as well. And so I think it's a changed situation a bit with that school statewide closure. So yeah, we've kept it as simple as we can.
Thank you. Are there other board questions, comments? We'll pause here for a few seconds. Looks like we're good to go. Do you want to proceed?
Sure. Okay, moving on to section 040, which gets into the what of what can be waived. So once the LEA has been granted the authority. So starting off, beginning from the date of approval of its waiver and then through July 31st, 2020. So it's the expiration date that you see in the establishing legislation. That would be the end date for the LEA as well, as far as them administering the waiver to individual students. But between that time period, from the date of approving through July 31st, the LEA may waive subject area credit graduation requirements outlined in subsection 2 for individual students after completing all of the following requirements. So these are things that we want to see the LEA do first before granting the waiver. So first, the LEA shall review the individual student's completed and planned coursework and determine that the student was on track by our definition. And the word individual was added from our earlier draft just to emphasize. Second, the local education agency shall demonstrate a good faith effort, which we defined above, to help that individual student meet the credits through other options if possible. Then third, the local education agency shall consult with the individual student and make a reasonable effort to consult with the parent or guardian of the student and make a reasonable effort to provide information about the waiver in the preferred languages of the student and of the parent or guardian of the student if applicable. And that wording did change a little bit. Originally it said student or parent, but we really want to focus in on the agency of the student here. And so the way we've worded it now requires that the LEA consult with the student, and the word consult kind of conveying a two-way communication, not just simply providing information, but consulting with the student. And then make a reasonable effort in recognizing that during this difficult time, it can be very challenging to reach families. And so we put the reasonable effort as far as consulting with parents and guardians piece of it. And then as far as what information shall be included, it's these pieces here at minimum. So we want to make sure that they are informed about what specifically is being waived for the individual student, the potential benefits and limitations that could result from receiving the waiver, including impacts on high school graduation and post-secondary plans. That wording was expanded upon. It originally said potential benefits and consequences. We changed the word consequences based on some feedback we received and instead say limitations that could result from receiving the waiver. And then also wanting to point out that this is both on high school graduation and potentially longer term into post-secondary plans as well. And then thirdly, the information should include the option for the individual student to decline the waiver and be provided the opportunity to earn the credits through continued enrollment. And this changed, we removed the word parents, but we are noting that the part up top does say make a reasonable effort to consult with the parent. So the parent aspect is still in it. It's just as far as the information that is included when it comes down to the option to decline, we removed the word parent there, but we do hope that the parent will be consulted to the extent reasonable. And then the next part moves on to what exactly can be waived. So waived credit graduation requirements are limited to those the student would have had an opportunity to earn by the end of the 2019 school year, excluding summer school. This was a change from the earlier draft, so we had inserted this excluding summer school. And that, again, we'll talk more about the possibility of whether or not we can extend it summer school. So first of all, what they could have earned. So that there's two parts to that. The first part is what they could have earned. Sorry. The first part is what they could have earned based on what they were enrolled in as of the date of the declaration of the emergency. So any courses or credit earning opportunities they were enrolled in at that point in time. And then also any credits that the student planned to complete by the end of the school year for terms that had not yet started. So for example, if the school was on a trimester or if there was running start and the term had not yet started as of February 29th, that this waiver could also cover the credits of the planned enrollment as indicated on the student's high school and beyond plan, in course registration records, or in the student's credit attainment or recovery plan. And this last part was in addition based on feedback that we received. So to Patty's earlier question about credit recovery, we are trying to recognize that that could be included here. Let's see here. We did also add the words by the end of the school year for clarity. And then here also pointing out the waived credits may include both core credits and flexible credits. The waiver may apply to students in international baccalaureate program. Schools that are operating under the waiver of credit-based graduation requirements can waive as well in a manner consistent with this section. And then each local education agency shall maintain a record of courses or requirements waived as part of the student record and report to the state board in a manner to be determined. So we did receive questions and feedback on this. Some questions, most wanting us to be more specific if we can. This we left intentionally vague because we are in the process of working this out. OSPI plays a major role in this piece here. And so while we are figuring out with them what this could entail, this is kind of a placeholder. And so there's a hope that we will be able to have a notation on the student's transcripts, but still yet to be determined exactly what format and how that will look. But we know that that would be very important to the higher ed sector in particular, as far as the downstream impact when it comes to college admissions and the importance for college admissions to be able to see that. And so we're working on that. And then also on the reporting aspect of this, and with the goal of piggybacking on other existing reporting. So this, we felt we couldn't get much more specific here, but this is kind of our effort to kind of address that we want, that there will be an expectation to maintain a record and report. And then lastly, this number 6 here was added based on feedback that we received. It says the local education agency shall consider equity in administering the emergency waiver under this section. And you'll note that that was also mentioned up above in the application. So it's making the requirement parallel and bringing it back up here in the section on administering, and adding some specifics to this. So the consideration should be designed to identify and mitigate potential disparate impacts of the emergency waiver and determine if any changes to the approach in administering it are needed before the conclusion of the school year. So the idea here being that this really should be an ongoing consideration while administering the waiver, and so that the LEA can be reflective on their process and course correct if necessary before the end of the school year. So I will pause at this point and see if there are any questions on the section that goes into the meat of what can be waived and the requirements that need to be met.
So Jaylee, I have a question. This is MJ.
Go ahead, MJ.
All right, so down on section 5, you kind of just went through the data collection. So what this feels to me is that we've made the application process pretty simple for a district to certify that they've done those things to require. But what we're saying here is that we're going to want to come back around and have some data potentially to help inform us as a state on how these were utilized. Is that kind of a way to look at this?
Yes, exactly. And part of it is at that individual student level for the sake of it being documented so that as that student moves forward into their life after high school, that there is a record of what specifically was waived for them. And then also at the aggregate level, the reporting aspect of it so that we can share back and learn as we look at the data on a whole.
Awesome, thank you.
Randy, can you talk about the reporting requirement here?
Yeah, so, well, we wanted to keep, as Jaylee had noted, we wanted to keep this vague because we're working with OSPI to figure out the most efficient way to collect this information. And actually on our calls with higher ed, there's been a real desire to see this maintained on the transcript or in some other record that they could see as well, so that they could take it into consideration on an ongoing basis, because after this year goes by, in a couple of years, it may be less transparent about what missing credit might mean on the transcript. So putting it on the transcript is preferable in many regards, but there's some complexities to that as well. So the idea, though, is that in general, what we'd like to do is look for a way in the various data collections at this through student data that we already have in our system. Is there a way to get this information through that process first? And so that's the conversation that we're having with the OSPI team about the best way to do that, so that we can make this as painless a process as possible, but more also to ensure that we are able to actually answer the kinds of questions we anticipate we'll get on this around things like, are we seeing disparate impacts in one way or another? How many credits are being waived? In what areas are they being waived? Those sorts of things.
Thank you. Do we have more board comments or questions about section 040? Hearing none, and we will have a chance at the very end to go back, and we'll go back one person by person to make sure there's nothing we've missed for anybody. But Jaylee, do you want to continue on to 050?
Sure. So this section is specific for private schools, and it allows them to waive the credit-based graduation requirements for individual students who are on track in a manner consistent with the previous section. So they have the same ability. And then for private schools that have implemented an online program consistent with this RCW and that are providing the remaining curriculum will be considered to have instructional hour requirements met, and that they have the discretion to determine whether the curriculum has been adequately satisfied. So we're just pointing that out. That was a common question that we were receiving, so answering that here. And then the State Board of Ed waives instructional hours and days requirements for the school year, and so that the number of hours and days offered after the declaration of emergency will not be considered for continued approval of private schools. And then there is a notification expectation that each private school will notify the state board of whether they are waiving any requirements under this section. The format yet to be determined, but again, that piece isn't figured out yet, but putting that expectation here in rule. And this section has not really changed at all in any substantive way since the previous draft. There's just a very minor wording change here, just for grammatical reasons, nothing substantive. Any questions on this section?
Hearing none, and I would note that the state board has reached out to the private school community, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. I don't see any questions about this section. Do you want, that would conclude the rules, but we now want to circle back to the staff proposal option B.
Before we do that, Peter, yeah, there are just a couple amendments to some existing WAC that I can point out as well. So at the bottom of the document, there are a couple other WACs that we have amendments down. This is specific to private schools, and it's for addressing the situation of if they are still 100% online come fall, that would be permissible for the school year under the conditions that they were already operating with non-provisional approval as of the date of the declaration of emergency, and that they maintain a physical address and plan to resume instruction when it's safe to do so. So we already have the authority, the rulemaking authority on this section. So we're able to look ahead to fall and try to address this question that private schools were raising regarding what happens if they're still 100% distance learning at that point in time. And then this other one here is just a simple referencing. This is referencing the new rules, but just wanting to insert that into some other sections of private school existing WAC because so that they're aware of the fact that they can use the new emergency waiver as well. Any questions on these amendments?
And this is Randy again, in case there's a question. The title of the existing WAC is a little bit odd. The place where the restriction that requires our private schools to offer classroom instruction is not on the approval side. It's on the discussion of what would cause them to lose approval. So that's why you see the language inserted here.
I have a question. So is this part of the emergency rule? And is it only for the emergency rule? And will it be part of the action item that we vote upon?
So yes, this is part of the emergency rule, but this would also, as we talked about moving into permanent rule, this would move into that permanent rule making as well. There may be other things we want to address if we go into permanent rulemaking. So when we talk about the approval to start the permanent rulemaking process, the chapters affected are a little bit different. It includes these chapters that were shown here. It also includes 180-51, which is where the high school graduation requirements are. Just because we want to be able to draft rule in the permanent rulemaking if necessary. We don't actually have a specific area plan, but we want to make sure that when we file the paperwork that chapter is also something we could consider when we move on to permanent rulemaking.
We had board questions about this aspect, which we will, I guess, be voting on as part of the action item, correct, Randy?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Linda, anybody in the, yeah, Linda, is there anyone in the queue?
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you.
Then if it's okay with you, Peter, I could move on to discuss the proposed option under consideration.
I think this would be a good time unless there's anything else that a board member wants to raise regarding what we've talked about so far. And again, we're going to circle back at the very end to see if there's anything else. Go ahead.
Okay, so board members would have received this in their email this afternoon, just a little bit before the meeting today. This is an issue staff have been exploring throughout the process. Probably the biggest feedback we received from, especially from local districts, is whether we could expand the waiver to cover more situations. And of course, we know that it is a very narrow scope, especially we know that we cannot apply it to earlier classes like the sophomores and juniors who also are being impacted right now, but needing to look for other solutions outside of this waiver because this cannot cover those circumstances. The issue also that is the July 31st expiration date in the language. And so initially we were interpreting that this would really be designed for students who completed the end of the regular school year because of the fact that the authority to use the waiver expires July 31st. But we've been exploring that further and determined that we could potentially expand this with some limitations to it. And so I'm just going to walk through what we are proposing and then open it up to board discussion to see reactions to it. So in summary, what the effect of this proposed change would be is that it would allow students to be eligible if they were on track to graduate by the end of the school year using the existing definition of school year in statute, which may extend to August 31st. So that's the common existing definition of school year. The LEA would still have to apply for, be granted, and administer the waiver on an individual student basis, all by the July 31st expiration date. Excuse me. So the decisions, the individual decisions would have to be made by that time as well. And then as far as what could be waived, the waived credits could potentially include planned summer enrollment as well if school is still closed in the summer and if all the other requirements are met as far as it being part of the student's plan and meeting the other definitions, and then the district showing that good faith effort to help that student. And then this next section here shows the different parts throughout the rule that would be impacted. And so I've cut little snippets, little snapshots of them here to go over them. And then the rest of it, we can walk through what it looks like in the rule. So this is kind of a condensed version that's showing all the changes in one place. So first of all, it affects the definitions section because where we had added this excluding summer school, we would suggest striking that back out and instead pointing to the definition of school year that is in RCW. So this change would allow students to be eligible if they were on track to graduate this school year, which ends at the end of August. And then it also affects the 040 section where it's talking about the requirements for administering the waiver. This is not a change, but I wanted to highlight that the July 31st deadline would still remain in here, that the time frame in which the LEA needs to apply those individual waivers would end as of that date as well. So that would not change. What would change down here is in the what can be waived section, and where it currently says limited to what they would have had the opportunity to earn by the end of the school year, excluding summer school, we would again strike that back out and then specify down here it would be based on what they were enrolled in at the time of the declaration of emergency. And then when it comes to planned enrollment, it would be what they had planned to complete by the end of the school year as defined in RCW. So again, noting that the end of the school year could go through August. And this is for the terms that hadn't started yet. So this is talking about at the time of this declaration, we will consider your planned enrollment if it's for a term that hadn't started yet. So you were on a trimester or a running start, or maybe you had a plan for some summer school. And that this was scheduled to occur during the period of school closure due to the novel coronavirus. So we had to add this in here to address what if school comes back in session. So if schools are able to come back for their summer term, then those credits would not be allowed to be waived. But under the very likely situation that school is probably not going to be in session in summer, then those credits, if they had been planned to be enrolled in summer school credits, could be waived. And then this specifies, this was already in here as indicated, so these planned credits must have been indicated on the student's high school and beyond plan, in course registration records, or in the student's credit attainment or recovery plan. So that is all of the changes that would be needed throughout. And then just so board members know, this is the full draft of the rules with regular kind of track changes so that you can see where these fall throughout the rule as a whole. But for now, I'm just going to go back up to this kind of snapshot view of what those changes are and open it up for discussion and questions.
This is Randy. I want to add just a couple of things too. So we heard a couple of different kinds of situations, and that where summer could be really important, and so this is part of what we're responding to. And so we considered situations in which summer may be part of that good faith effort to get students credit. So there may be a situation in which some of the students' spring classes would be waived. And then other of those classes, they may have a plan to complete them. If it's, say, for example, something that's important for whatever their post-secondary plans are, they may want to complete those summer, that 1 or 2 classes, but the waiver would help relieve some pressure so that they could get other classes that they had been enrolled in for spring off the plate and allow them to kind of make progress. So that was one kind of example. We also heard a number of different examples of situations where a student might need to continue into the summer as part of their regular plan. It was part of their sort of on-track plan to begin with. So some students in recovery, for example, might be in that situation, but also some students receiving special education services may need to extend into, or may continue to receive services into the summer because of the time that they lost during the year. And so those were the sorts of things that were coming through in the feedback we received. And I think there are a couple members who are actually know this land better than I do, who could speak more about that. But that was sort of the kinds of things we're hearing. We do want to kind of express some caution on this too, though, because what we did not want to do is create a situation where you could have huge amounts of credit potentially waived. And so we didn't want to expand the on-track definition to include lots more stuff. And so that's why we want to be really mindful of that piece of this that kind of talks about during the closure, right? And right now that closure ends on June 19th. And so from a planning standpoint, as districts are kind of thinking about what could be waived and what couldn't, that would be the operative date, at least now.
And one other point that I want to mention is just we just to point out that we did a good amount of outreach with different stakeholder groups to gauge kind of what reactions to this would be. And so far it's a very short time frame in which to collect feedback, but across the different stakeholders, we're seeing unanimous agreement that this flexibility would be a good direction to take this in.
Okay, so Randy, Lee, are you ready for board questions and comment about this section?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody wish to ask questions or have board discussion about the staff proposal B?
Linda, do you have people signed up?
I do not.
Oh, that's a surprise.
I want to make sure that everybody has this, you have the materials in front of you, is that correct?
Holly would like to make a comment.
Go ahead, Holly.
Are we at the point where we're commenting instead of asking questions? I don't have a question, just a comment on the staff proposal.
I think comments and questions are the same. Yes.
All right. So I listened to your caution, Randy, and I mean, sort of the same thought occurred to me that, you know, extending it out through summer school, I mean, it could end up being a lot of credits for students that were in credit retrieval and still trying to do credit retrieval. But I think the thing that helps alleviate anxiety that I have around this is that, you know, the state board isn't granting individual students waivers for a whole lot of credits. You know, there's that LEA filter out there. And I think, you know, the counselors and principals and school boards and superintendents in those LEAs, you know, really want what's best for their kids. I mean, we're putting a lot of trust in the LEAs through this entire process. And, you know, so far as we look around the state, we're seeing amazing efforts made. So, you know, I feel really comfortable if school is still not in session, if the stay-at-home order is still in place through summer school, you know, it really puts it on the same footing as the regular school year in terms of what a student's plans were and how this is, a senior's plans were and how this is disrupting them. You know, it would still, if districts cannot grant waivers for those credits that a student was planning to do in summer school, you know, it still puts those students behind their plans for the fall. So I feel really comfortable with that LEA filter in there.
Bill has a comment as well.
Hi, yes, thank you. Yeah, I just want to appreciate, I think this is a good catch as far as the summer school. That was kind of one of my big worries when all this kind of came about was we know there's a group of students who are scrambling to finish and get across the finish line as far as graduation. And those are the kids that I was worried could potentially be left out. And I think we've done, staff have done a really good job of paying attention to this issue and making sure that we're extending opportunities to those kids who might otherwise just be left behind. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Do we have other board members who wish to comment or ask questions? I have something, but I want to wait until others have weighed in. Okay, I'll go ahead. So I appreciate the careful thinking that's gone into this summer school question. I have some degree of concern about how it would be implemented. I understand that the intention, which is certainly a good one, was how to address students who are credit deficient by a credit or two and who had intended to use summer school to catch up, and then we won't have summer school or we won't have the opportunity to catch up during the spring session. And that's important. And as Holly points out, this will be determined by the school districts and the tribal compact schools themselves. But at the same time, I would not want to open the door to granting of credits who, as of February 29th, were very much deficient in many credits, and who could not be reasonably expected to catch up during spring quarter or summer. And I don't believe that's the intention. So I make that statement because that's my view. I guess the question is for Randy. This has some subtlety to it, and would it be this State Board's intention to issue guidance on how this is actually implemented? This will be implemented to some extent by high school counselors, and I think some clarity might be wise.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is not something that's going to get turned around on a dime. I mean, districts are going to have to be working with students through spring and into summer to make these determinations. They may have to make a decision about whether or not to waive credit by the end of July. As I mentioned, I think from a operational standpoint right now, working with students, the spring still sort of holds as the planning time frame, because that's when we know statewide closures are for sure. And so I don't think that it would be appropriate to make a plan that included waiving summer credits right now today. And so I think the guidance could talk through that piece of it. Guidance isn't binding, so districts are going to still have some latitude, but that I think is how I would think about framing that in terms of the conversation with locals as they implement now. And the other thing I just mentioned is that throughout this whole rule, and it's always important to keep this in context, the first preference is to get credit for the student. And this is really the backup plan for that. So throughout this, that good faith effort part needs to carry through as well.
And my second question is, I note in 041 sub 1, it says that the district has to make its waiver decision on the individual students by July 31st. Is that correct, Julie?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Yeah, in 040 sub 1, it says that the LEA has to make its decision on individual students by July 31st.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not a rolling kind of continuing authorization. It's limited in this time frame.
Yes, this Randy, that goes back to our interpretation of the statute, and it's also why we didn't initially think we could include summer, but the enabling legislations gives the board the authority to administer a waiver program, and that authority expires on July 31st. So we interpret that as saying the entire program really goes away as of the 31st. So decisions that were made for students who are currently enrolled, we think could stick, but that decision would have to be made by July 31st.
Are there other board comments, suggestions, questions about the option B staff proposal?
This is MJ. I just wanted to say I really appreciate this recommendation from the staff, this change. I think it's more consistent, you know, with probably the law, and it makes sense since it extends through the extent of the full school year. And I do think, you know, we would have students that would be completing, you know, would have been completing their regular coursework throughout that year, throughout the summer, and able to graduate. Like Patty mentioned in her, you know, case scenario where you might have students taking extra caseload to recover some credits, and we've heard about those. So I think this flexibility is important. I know we don't want just this mass exodus of kids that wouldn't have graduated had all this not happened, but I think this leaves the flexibility there again up to the local districts, and I think that's really important.
Anyone else on this particular aspect? If not, what I suggest we do is I will go through one by one just to make sure anybody has any comments or questions about the rules, and then we're going to talk about the resolution and the permanent rule. All right, so I'll begin with our students. Margarita, do you have anything that you would like to add at this point?
I'm good so far, Peter. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And people don't have to comment. I just want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity. Autumn Wild?
Hi, I just wanted to make sure, I know we already went over it, but I just wanted to like highlight it again that we're not just talking about enrolling in courses, but also like, I think the terminology was credit earning opportunities. So for like students who are in spring sports or in like extracurricular activities that would have awarded credit, like theater. I know at my school actually awards a fine arts credit for like if you are in a play and such. And so I just wanted to make sure that we are valuing that aspect of credit earning as well. And I think we did a good job of that in the list that we just went over.
Yeah.
Staff, do you want to respond to
Yeah,
Autumn's
so
question?
thank you, Peter. Yeah, the language and rule is sufficiently broad to allow for that, and that may come up in as a guidance item as well.
Thank you. It's always great to have the student perspective. Chris Reichdahl.
Sorry, Peter. We were over here having a heated conversation, but not about this topic. Is there something you need me to check in with here?
Yeah, dude. Well, and I know you have lots. We're just going one by one to see if there are any questions or comments about the rules, including the option B staff proposal, which we've just discussed, and I think has had board. Nobody said any
No,
that it's
I'm
not
good.
acceptable.
I'm good. Thank you.
So if there's any, this is a check-in to see if there's anything that you want to offer about the rules before we go on to the resolution. You're good?
Yeah, I'm good to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ryan?
Nothing more to add. Just appreciate all the work that's gone into getting us to this point.
Thank you. Patty Wood?
No, I'm good. I appreciate this addition. That's my only comment.
Thank you. Jen Brown?
I just want to thank you for the private sector and the specificity of language around the online program. I think the additional language is very helpful.
Mary Furtakis?
Thank you, and thank you to staff for all of this. My concerns and input that I had raised related to the equity piece was addressed, and thank you for the addressing the summer school piece. So I'm good.
Susanna Reyes?
Hi, thank you for the opportunity, Peter. I think that overall, having read through the different comments, we see that through the potential changes to the language, it covers most of that. I think that it's going to really provide districts an opportunity to look at truly the individual student and work with them around what makes the most sense and what's going to work for them to make sure that we help them complete their senior year if they were on track and planning on it. So thank you for that flexibility that I think this will provide our districts.
Paul Petrie? Paul, are you there? We'll return to you.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, do you have any comments or anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I do. I just want to say that yeah, I think it was very well done. I'm happy that we're also considering the fact that students will be taking coursework or would have been taking coursework over the summer. So I think it's very helpful in helping students to be able to meet their graduation requirement. So the only I have forward, and that's the fact that this could adversely affect students who may have junior, sophomore, freshman status. But that's a total different question, but that's something that's come to mind for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Holly Kuhn on the phone.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, I think, you know, I don't have anything to add in terms of, you know, hearing pretty broad agreement across board members that the proposal around summer school, extending this to summer school if summer school is canceled, is a good idea. But, you know, it did occur to me that one of our, you know, first and foremost concerns in all of this is equity. And I think about the students that, you know, were the most likely to be needing summer school to graduate. And, you know, for a lot of those students are students that missed some school early on for you know, family reasons or foster kids or students with a lot of mobility. So I think that's really, I think it's a really great way to swing back around and swoop up some of those equity concerns, including that. So again, really great catch, and thanks to staff so much for their flexibility and hard work and scrambling to put this together.
Thank you, Holly. Harry Martin Morris.
Yeah, I also want to add my thanks to the staff for all of the incredible heavy lifting that they did to get us to this point. But I also, not to be a downer, but this is just step one. We have a lot more to do for all of those students that are coming out to follow, and the implications of all of those things, as Paul was saying, on those others that are freshmen, sophomores, and juniors now. So it's a good first step, and it's a solid one, but we still aren't going to be able to take our foot off of the gas pedal.
Thank you, Harry M. Bill Kalopla.
Hi, yeah, nothing further except for, you know, I want to echo my thanks, as other board members have, to staff that has spent a lot of time putting this together and have done really a wonderful job given the situation that we find ourselves in. I also want to thank the staff at OSPI, because I know that they have put in an exorbitant amount of time during these times as well. So thanks to both staff.
Thank you, Bill. MJ Bolt.
I am good.
2 words, wonderful. Peter Mayer, people have said it already. I think this is careful work, carefully crafted rules, and not easily achieved in the face of uncertainty, and I think we should be mindful of that. So with that, I think we've concluded our discussion of the rules. We're going to, of course, return back when we get to the business item, and there will be an opportunity to have further board discussion if we need to. I'd like to now have a discussion about the resolution and about the permanent rules. And then we're going to take a break for about 5 or 10 minutes to allow us to stretch, but also allow the staff to then incorporate, I believe it'd be appropriate, given what we've heard so far, to incorporate option B, staff proposal, in the action item for the rules, unless board members object. But we want to make sure that that whatever we vote upon is the proper document, and so taking a recess will allow that as well. So I think Randy, do you want to talk? Next step would be to talk about the resolution, and thank you, Jay Lee, or maybe you're the person to do that. But Randy, why don't you decide who should talk about the resolution, and then we'll talk about the permanent rules.
Yep, I will bring that up, except I did want to just point out you skipped Jeff, so maybe give Jeff a chance to say something.
Oh my, I'm sorry. My apologies.
Okay, so I'll try to even do better than the 2 words. Ditto. How's that? And everything everybody said. Actually, I wanted to make one observation, not just about the product, but particularly the process. And I think Harry and others latest. I've been particularly struck about the nature of the collaborative nature of all those involved working toward in this particular time and challenge. And it's the kind of thing that I think everyone should be proud of as we keep students in mind and moving forward. And it's perhaps an example of being our best selves. And it's a good thing for us all to do that. So I do want to congratulate all those partners and the SBA staff and the board for that work. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. So let's see, should we talk about the resolution first or the permanent rulemaking initiation?
Let's go ahead. We can go ahead and do the resolution if that's okay. And I can just really briefly describe what's in here and kind of my understanding of the direction on this. And then if there's discussion, we could go there. Playing with word, trying to get this to come up. I apologize. I will share the resolution real quickly here, if I can.
For the public, can you explain what we're
Yes.
is.
So the resolution is a delegation of authority that would basically for some reason it's not showing up as something to share. I apologize. I cannot bring it on screen. So I'm gonna have to just cancel out of that. So am I sharing my screen now?
No, Randy, do you want to talk about the other one, the initiation, while your staff works on putting the resolution on?
Yeah, I apologize. I am stuck in Zoom here. Give me just one moment. So
Can you see it now? I tried to bring it up on mine.
Thank you. I can see it now. So the purpose of the resolution, the board has authority to delegate some of their authority to the executive director. I think this situation is the kind of situation that makes sense to do that because we're in a place where these approvals are really critical to helping districts move forward on the next steps as students go forward. And so if you could scroll down to the sort of the action part of this, the be it resolved. The first part, the whereases, are really kind of outlining the situation and the fact that the board has authority to delegate authority to the executive director. What this is granting is authority for me to approve waivers and requiring that I post those and the information collected in the applications promptly to the website and share information back with the board. In discussions with members, my understanding is that this would be something that would be applied after the board has had a chance to review the first set of applications. And we are asking for the authority now, though, so that we don't slow down that process. And so I think it's just important to put it in the context. As I'm hearing the guidance is, I won't approve anything until after that meeting on the 21st, unless something else happens that causes us to not be able to get a quorum or some other reason we wouldn't be able to approve applications. So that's the guidance that I've heard. But the point here is so that we can efficiently move through this process and give the districts the information they need so that they can begin working with students and moving them on towards graduation. So do you want me to say more than that, Peter? Or see what questions we have?
So Peter here, I just wanted to frame this issue. First of all, this resolution has one change from the prior draft, which is that it took out the executive board approval, which will allow the faster processing. But as Randy has said, it is the intention to have on April 21st, a full board meeting to review and consider the first wave of applications. Thereafter, it would be delegated to the executive director. There's one asterisk to the April 21st meeting, which is by adopting the resolution and delegation today, we would take care of the situation, which is unlikely, but coronavirus has its own path, which is if in the unlikely event that we're unable to get a board quorum, or if illness among staff makes such a meeting impossible. And then we would want to have this available so we don't hold up any school districts. And I think that's the intention. Is that right, Randy?
Yes.
All right. Board questions, comments about the resolution?
This is Patty. I just wanted to say thank you for this. I appreciate this a lot. I like the additional transparency, and a bigger part of this is we are building this the first time, just as we understood the Part B option with summer school. I wouldn't be surprised if we learn something along the way in the next couple weeks, and having the opportunity for the board to meet again in the first approval of that is also appreciated as well. So thank you very much.
Any other board members have comments or questions before we move to the beginning of permanent rulemaking? And this will be an action item that we will vote on in shortly.
Yeah, this is Ryan.
Go ahead.
Oh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So as I understand our bylaws, if the executive director were unable to serve in his current capacity for any reason, the authority we are granting to the executive director would be essentially on hold until the State Board of Education were to appoint an interim or permanent executive director. So unless I'm missing something, I believe it would also be prudent for us to consider coming up with a solution that would allow the delegation of authority to be immediately transferred to someone else, maybe that has been pre-identified, so that the process of granting waivers could continue without disruption.
So that's an interesting question. I don't think we have a succession plan in place. We could say delegates to the executive director or his or successor. The question, I don't think our bylaws directly address the question of a successor to the executive director, but it's a good point, and we might want to add some language there. Then it's a separate question of an internal question of who would serve as a temporary executive director.
Yeah, I think actually, I think because we can check this during the break, but I think the statute gives you authority to delegate to the executive director and not to an alternate beyond that. And so the board may need to convene and actually appoint an interim in that instance.
That's true. It's by statute, Ryan. So.
Okay. Okay.
More you want to say?
Oh, can I add something, Peter? Is that okay?
Well, let's let Ryan finish and then Bill.
No, that's really all I had. I just, if it's something in statute, there's not a whole lot more that we can probably do about that, but that is something that, just something to consider. I mean, we gotta kind of think of all of the possible things that we could be up against, and including, executive directors out sick for a while, let alone he, leaves his house when he shouldn't be and gets hit by a grand piano. So don't do that.
Well, coronavirus certainly raises issues of mortality of all of us, and something we should explore. Bill Klapla, did you have something?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, Ryan brings up a great point that I hadn't thought of. Thank you, Ryan, for that. But I believe it would just get kicked back to us as a board, right, to reconvene at that point.
The real question would be if for some reason society sort of gets knocked sideways and we can't do things like hold board meetings and get quorums and so forth.
Gotcha.
So I guess unless there's some way that, the other way that we could look at this is, it says the executive director, but if for some reason we had a temporary executive director, we might be able to use that. I don't think we have a fix for this unless during the recess, our staff or lawyer can figure out something. Randy, do you have a comment?
Sorry, struggling with mute. Yeah, we'll try to check with double check the statute and maybe check with council over the break. But I think that you're correct. I think the board would have to reconvene in some fashion, either to do the approvals or to appoint an interim that could take on the delegation.
But the larger issue is something that we probably should have in our hip pocket if necessary. All right. Yeah. Any other board members have issues about or comments about the resolution before we move on? Patty, do you have something?
No, I don't.
So let's move on, unless there are other board members, don't see anybody in chat. Let's move on to the initiation of permanent rulemaking, which will also be something we vote on, and then we can take our recess.
Yeah, so just, do I have my mic on? Yeah, so the permanent rulemaking issue, we are asking for the board to give authority to file what's called the CR 101, which is the beginning of the permanent rulemaking process. There's two reasons that we want to do this. So one is that emergency rules have a life of 120 days. And if we begin the emergency rulemaking, then we can extend that if for some reason the orders get extended or the legislation extends that time window between now and the 31st of July. But it also allows us to amend. But the other issue is that there are little pieces like the private school piece that we can do in emergency rulemaking now. And we would also need to have a life beyond that 120 days. And so the note about private schools being able to operate online in the fall, for example, would be something that would require us to move into that permanent rulemaking phase so it can have a life beyond the 120 days. In the approval for beginning permanent rulemaking, we're also calling out Chapter 18051, which is the graduation requirements. And the reason we did that is we anticipate other things that are within the board's authority might come up between now and when we have draft rules. We don't have anything specific in mind yet. I would say we did ask a question, and we will continue to look at whether there are things that would be helpful in rule to support the work WASDA is doing around model policy for competency or mastery-based credit. And so that's an example where there may be some things we could do in rule that could support, where we could be mutually supportive in that information. So that's the type of thing we want to make room for, but also we have a little bit more time for that. So that's the purpose behind it. Are there any questions about the permanent rulemaking?
And just to be clear, Randy, this is the beginning of possible rulemaking, does not commit us to anything. Is that correct?
Yeah, all this does is allow us to start the process. And so there are no draft rules yet. That would come in a next phase. As you recall, the rulemaking is sort of a standard rulemaking is a three-part process where you have this is the notice that you're opening the rules, and then we would have draft rules, and then a public hearing, and then final adoption of rules. That's the process for permanent rulemaking.
Okay, anything more on this? Seeing none. So we intended to take a break now before we move to communications and then the business items. Randy, how long would 10 minutes be sufficient for your staff to mount the exhibits that we will then vote upon?
Yeah, I think 10 minutes will be sufficient. The Jaylee and Parker are going to work on making sure the exhibits are prepared. I only heard changes to the proposed rules. I didn't hear any changes that we are going to work on for the other two exhibits, but I will double check on that issue around the granting of delegation over the break. I think I have the answer here, but I want to just confirm it over the break. And then we will share those documents back out with the board before you take action. So it's possible that the development on the exhibit for the emergency rules might extend into the communication discussion, but we'll get it out as quickly as we can.
I have a clarifying question, Peter.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is MJ. I just wanted to clarify that what we'll be looking at with the rules will incorporate the suggestions from staff, including summer school. Is that accurate? Or
that's the direction we heard. So I think the motion would be on that revised draft.
Okay, thank you. And
that's one reason.
versus an amendment. That's what I just wanted to be clear about.
Oh, yes.
We don't have anything in front of us, so having heard the board discussion, it seems to be that's the direction we're going. So we will then have that be the motion, and the recess will allow staff to make sure that it will be presented to us as an exhibit with incorporated the changes as proposed by the staff. All right, so we will take a recess. We're going to reconvene at 10 of sharp. And Randy, for members of the public, I think we just keep, we just plug our
Yes.
headset, move, we'll leave it open. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So there's a slide up on the screen with the timing. So
great. Okay. So we will reconvene at 10 of.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
Guys, this is Holly, and I'm just checking. I just switched phones. I was running out of battery on my home phone, my wireless phone. Can you hear me still?
Yes.
Ready to go back on? Can't hear you, Randy.
I guess I need to unmute. I'm back.
Are we ready to proceed? Is your staff ready?
Stephanie, are you ready to go? Talk about communications?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Awesome.
And did you see Linda S.C.'s
Yes.
comment? Good. All right. So are we live?
We are live.
Okay, we're back in session. So we're going to hear from our communications manager, Stephanie Davidsmeyer, and then we'll move into the business items.
Hi, everyone. It's Stephanie Davidsmeyer. You've probably received quite a bit of email from me over the past couple weeks. This is going to be a really brief kind of snapshot of our communications plans about the emergency rules moving forward. So first, I want to thank you, all the attendees, for some of the great questions we've received already in the SB inbox. There's quite a few, and they're really good ones. We're going to work to answer those as soon as we possibly can. So if you have any comments or questions, keep them coming, sbe@k12.wa.us. We're recording this session, and we hope to have it available for you tomorrow. Also, today, we want to put out a press release after this with an FAQ that we've already developed with some of the great feedback and questions we've received from the field so far. So look for that. If we can expand our reach, we'd love to. Please reach out to me. I know some of our partner organizations have already done so. Thank you to AWSP for being kind of the first one to reach out and ask, can we help moving your communications forward? So thank you again. And I just want to reiterate that if you email sbe@k12.wa.us, we can help you. And that's the communications portion.
And then this is Randy. I'll also just mention WASA has scheduled a webinar for tomorrow as well to talk about some of this. And we hope to be launching our application, as I said earlier in the meeting this week. We think that will happen, but our drop dead date is no later than the 15th for an application. So as Stephanie mentioned, just really appreciate all the partnership and up to this point and going forward. So thanks. Do we have questions before we go into the business items?
This is MJ. I just have a comment.
Go ahead.
I just want to, I know we've given a lot of kudos, but again, on the communications part, this is where, to me, this really falls. I think staff and everybody has done a tremendous job. I know multiple people have been on, you've had calls with other stakeholders as well as reaching out. And I just think it's just, for this short of a timeline, you guys have done a great job. And I'm really excited too, because I've heard that Randy, you are going to be part of that call tomorrow with WASA. And so I just think that collaboration with our stakeholders has been just dynamite. So thank you again on behalf of everyone on the board, but also, for our stakeholders and our students being that thorough.
Thank you, MJ. Anything else on communications?
I want to check in with Jaylee and Parker to see if they're back and if we have a exhibit ready.
Okay.
Ready to go.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before we get there, I want to say that it was Ryan Brault who raised the issue about the executive director being incapacitated. We have some information which we believe the path would be, if that were the case, which we hope never happens, then the board would convene and appoint an interim executive director who would assume those responsibilities. So that would be the path we need to go in that unlikely circumstance. Is that your understanding also, Randy?
Yes, that squares with my understanding as well.
Is there anything else we need to cover as a board before we move into the business items?
Nothing on my list, Randy, nothing on my list. I do want to make sure that language the exhibit gets emailed out to members too, so you can see it.
Okay. You need more time for that?
I'm just, Parker, did that already go out the door?
Give me 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
30 seconds you have.
And I'll email it.
And will we also be able to display it on the screen so that the public and board members will be able to see it?
Yes.
Okay. So while Parker's working on that, what we're going to do is we'll go into our business items. We'll consider the emergency rules. We'll consider the approval of beginning permanent rulemaking, and then we'll deal with the delegation of authority. The process we're going to go through this is that our vice chair, MJ Bolt, will make the formal motion. We're doing it that way because the motion language, getting it right matters. Any member will then may second, and then we'll have a board discussion, and then we'll have a roll call vote. And just for members of the public, this includes our student members who give an advisory vote. Their votes do not count for the quorum or for the actual item being considered. That's under present state law. Did that consume 30 seconds?
Oh yeah. So Parker, when you're ready to bring up the first exhibit on the rules, please do so.
Sounds good. It should be in your inboxes and it'll be on the screen momentarily.
Thank you, Parker. Take your time to do it correctly. And what we'll do is we'll have a motion in front of us, and then we'll scroll down and make sure that this is exactly what we want, including the changes. Okay, we're ready to proceed?
Ready.
Right. So Member Bolt, would you make the motion on the adoption of emergency rules on chapters 180, 111, and 180-90 of the WAC?
Yeah, Chair Mayor, I move to adopt emergency rules for chapters 180-111 and 180-90 WAC as shown in Exhibit A.
Member Bolt has made the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And please identify who this is.
Sorry, this is Bill Kalapa. I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that to adopt emergency rules for chapters 180, 111, and 180-90 WAC as shown on Exhibit A, which is on the screen. Now we move to discussion, and we take any discussion, but before we do that, perhaps we can scroll down just to make sure that Exhibit A reflects the changes that were suggested by our staff. So let's go section by section, please. So 010 had no changes, correct? Oh, I see. Okay, you've got the strike. So Parker, when we vote, you will take out the strikes, is that correct?
Correct. I will accept all track changes when you vote. And I can move from track change to track change if that would be a preferable way to move through.
No, I think that's fine. So 020, go ahead.
That was all I saw.
Yeah, 030 had no changes, I believe. And Julie, you correct if this is incorrect. Right. So 040.
Correct.
Just scroll up, I'm sorry. Okay, hold it there. Go ahead. Okay. And then, so on the emergency rules, these are the only changes, is that correct?
Let me verify by going through to the next set of track changes. 1 second. That is correct. There are no remaining track changes in, compared to the document that you had received in your packet.
Okay, and then aren't there some ones for other WACs that we need to scroll through as well? And
there are the changes to the private school WACs. I'd be happy to show you them. 1 second.
And then we'll have board comments. I just want to make sure that we're all, yeah.
Showing on the screen now is a change to WAC 90-141, loss of private school approval. That would allow them to begin the school year with an online education program in the event of continued closure.
And this was in the document that was mailed out, just to be clear.
Yeah. Just continue scrolling down so we make sure that we're what we're voting on. No changes in the private school portions, correct?
There is a change that says except as provided in WAC 18011, but this was in the packet materials that you previously received. This is not a new change since then.
Thank you.
Same
All
language again listed on in that.
Okay. All right. So what we would be voting upon would be what was just scrolled in front of us. Are there board comments or discussion about the motion on the floor? Hearing none, unless there's anybody who wants to discuss further, I will call the roll. I will begin with the students in their advisory capacity. Does either of our student members wish to signify their support, opposition, or abstention to the motion to adopt Exhibit A?
Hey, this is Autumn Wild here, and I support.
Thank you, Autumn.
Hi, it's Margarita, and I support as well.
Thank you. I'll go up the line as I did previously. Chris Reichdahl, what is your vote?
Aye.
Chris Reichdahl votes aye. Ryan Brout?
Aye.
Patty Wood?
Aye.
Jan Brown?
I support.
You vote aye.
Aye.
Mary Furtakis?
Aye.
Susanna Reyes?
Aye.
Paul Petrie?
Yeah, I vote in favor.
Holly Kuhn?
Aye.
Jeff Estes?
Aye.
Harry Martin Morris?
Aye.
Bill Klopla?
Aye.
MJ Bolt?
Aye.
Peter Mayer? Aye. The motion passes unanimously. The next item is dealing with permanent rulemaking. Member Bolt, would you like to make a motion?
Yes. Chair Mayor, I move to approve initiation of permanent rulemaking on chapters 180-111, 180-51, and 180-90 WAC.
Is there a second?
Second, this is Ryan Brault.
And please identify yourself. Ryan Brault has seconded. It's been moved and seconded to approve the initiation of permanent rulemaking on chapters 180-111, 180-51, and 180-90 WAC. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will move to the vote. We'll move through in the same order. Do either of our student members wish to indicate their support, opposition, or abstention to the motion to approve initiation of permanent rulemaking on chapters 180, 111, 180, 51, and 180-90 WAC?
Autumn Wild here, I support.
I support as well.
Margarita supports as well. Thank you so much. Thumbs up. Going through in the same order, Chris Reichdahl, please indicate whether your position. Aye.
Aye.
Ryan Brown?
Aye.
Patty Wood?
Aye.
Jan Brown?
Aye.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Aye for Jan Brown. Mary Furtakis?
Aye.
Susanna Reyes?
Aye.
Paul Petrie?
Oh, I vote in favor. Thanks.
Aye for Paul Petrie. Holly Kuhn?
Aye.
Aye for Holly Kuhn. Harry Martin Morris?
Aye.
Aye. Bill Klopla?
Aye.
MJ Bolt?
Aye.
Peter Mayer? Aye. The motion passes unanimously.
You missed Jeff.
Once again, but I vote aye.
Did I miss him again? I'm so sorry.
I don't know what I did to you, Peter, but I apologize.
No, I apologize. Jeff Estes votes aye. Correct?
That is correct.
All right. Have I missed anybody else? Don't believe so. All right. So the motion passes unanimously. MJ Bolt, would you like to make a motion as to the delegation?
Yes, Chair Mayor, I move to approve the resolution delegating authority to the Executive Director as shown in Exhibit B for administration of waiver applications from local education agencies.
Is there a second?
Holly seconds.
And please indicate who this is for the record.
Holly Kuhn, second.
Holly Kuhn seconded?
Yes, Holly.
Yeah, but the record wants, we need to be clear about who made this second. I want to make sure that I heard correctly. It was Holly Kuhn who seconded?
Peter, I second it. Holly Kuhn seconds the motion.
Thank you. This is for clarity of the record. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve a resolution delegating authority to the executive director as shown in Exhibit B for administration of waiver applications from local education agencies. Is there board discussion? And let's begin by reviewing the Exhibit B, which is on the screen. And Parker and Randy, this is the same as we've seen previously. Is that correct?
Yes, Parker added Exhibit B to the title, but yes, it's the same.
Okay, please scroll down. This is a lot easier when we're in the same room. Is there any board discussion about the resolution? Hearing none, we will vote on the motion. I will begin with the advisory vote of the two student members. Two student members, do you wish to indicate your support, opposition, or abstention to the motion before us?
Autumn Wild here, and I support.
Support from Autumn Wild.
Hi, Margarita Amezcua here, and I support as well.
Thank you. And we'll go call the roll. Chris Reichdahl.
Aye.
Ryan Brout.
I am with the students.
I'm sorry, we didn't hear you, Ryan.
Aye.
Ryan Brout votes aye. Patty Wood.
Aye.
Jan Brown.
Aye.
Mary Furtakis.
Aye.
Susanna Reyes.
Aye.
Paul Petrie.
Yes, I vote in favor.
Aye for Paul Petrie. Holly Kuhn.
Aye.
Aye for Holly Kuhn. Jeff Estes.
Hey, aye.
Aye for Jeff Estes. Harry Martin Morris.
Aye.
Bill Kalapala.
Aye.
MJ Bolt.
Aye.
Peter Mayer. Aye. The motion passes unanimously. Near the end. I believe, Randy, you wanted to have a wrap up, and I have just a few comments at the end.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we touched on a lot of it with the communication, but our next steps will be to communicate broadly about the rules, to make the application available and begin reviewing those. I think one of the critical piece too is that we will also confirm the time on April 21st. And Peter, I think you were going to speak to that, but the plan that, as I have it anyway, is that we would repurpose what had been scheduled as an executive committee meeting and add some time for a special board meeting on the 21st from 8 to 9:30 to review the first batch of applicants that are received by that time. And those are the critical next steps. We will be continuing to do some outreach with partners and to help with communication and answering questions. Also, I just want to acknowledge Stephanie mentioned an FAQ. Staff have been working on that. We'll finalize that now with your action and get that out with the other materials. And last thing I want to say is just a thank you both to members, to the community, and to staff who I think we've done about 3 months of work in the last 3 weeks, and I really appreciate all the everybody pitching in and the staff on this. It's been a good process, and I think we've done a lot in a very short period of time. So thank you to staff who really make this happen. I get to talk a lot, but they actually do the real work. So thank you.
And Randy, when would school districts and tribal compact schools and private school or charter schools expect to get the have the application? I know it can happen today.
Yeah, we think it may be as early as tomorrow. We want to confirm that, but we're hoping to launch it tomorrow or Friday. And as I mentioned earlier, our deadline that we set to ourselves was not later than Wednesday of next week.
Okay. And will that be available on the website as well, if they're wondering?
Yeah, it'll be launched through the iGrant system, and so that there's a communication protocol for that. And then I'm not sure if we can make the link available on our website, but we will push it out through different channels to make sure folks know about it.
Okay, thank you. Before we conclude, are there any board members who wish to offer anything else for the good of the order?
This is Holly. I have a question.
Go ahead.
So there's some guidance, we talked about earlier, some guidance that's going to go out around some aspects of the emergency rules that we just approved. And I am wondering if there's going to be any opportunity for members to sort of weigh in on that, just emailing concerns or questions or ideas to staff or to you, and the executive committee talks about it. Or I know we had brought up somebody had brought up the question earlier of whether or not on track should include, consideration of grades at the time of school closure. I think there was a couple of other questions maybe related to the summer school. So what's the process going forward on that before guidance goes out?
So we have a guidance document that will launch, and then we can make adjustments. The intent is it would be a dynamic document. We suspect that doesn't necessarily mean I don't want to imply that we'll be changing answers, but we'll be adding new questions as they come up, is the way we had envisioned that. And so that's what we had in mind. So if there are some though that we have some uncertainty about, we could review that. The one on grades actually is that grades are not part of the consideration for on track the way in the rules that were just adopted.
Okay, that sounds great. Is there any chance that members could get a look at that before it goes out to the public, or is it going out like immediately?
I'm going to look at Stephanie. I think we could probably send that out. Is that accurate?
Talking about the FAQ?
Yeah.
We had planned to launch it directly after the board meeting, but we can email it to you, and then we could send it out with the recording of the board meeting, if that works better. Tomorrow.
Holly, are you talking about the FAQ or are you talking about the guidance?
Well, the FAQ and the guidance are one and the same at this point in time. So yeah.
So I think it's not in any way that I don't trust staff to have totally handled this. I would just like to be, a tenth of a step ahead of the general public and not, be surprised by questions or interpretations of that kind of stuff. I'd just love to get a chance to look at it briefly at least.
We can make that happen.
Okay. And with a very short turnaround, I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Holly, that work for you?
I will look at it immediately, and probably anybody else will too that's interested. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Any other board members who wish to offer comments? Hearing none, wrapping up the meeting, I thank the board members and the board staff especially, who've worked so hard to pull together these rules in a very short time frame. We also thank our educational partners and members of the public for their impact and their insight and suggestions on the rules. We had early and frequent contact with our educational community, and the rules reflect that output. I also note that on this meeting, we had at one point 355 participants, which is terrific. And then in conclusion, these rules on high school graduation requirements are an important step forward, but they're not the end. There's additional work that needs to be done to address the impact of coronavirus on our state schools, and some that work will depend upon how events unfold. And we as a state board will continue to work in collaboration with the OSPI and other educational partners moving forward. So I think the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.